well, now we've got Dr. Doyin Okupe, who is a former senior special assistant on public affairs to the president. He joins us via Skype. Good morning, Doctor. Good to see you, and thank you for joining us today on the program.
Good morning, Chamberlain. Long time.
Yes, you know, many people know your story. Many others don't, but it is a good thing to have you speak to us today. You did go through, you were positive, you survived, you've been talking about this, so you might as well just go ahead and tell us. How did this all happen for you?
Well, I live in Ikweru in Ogun State, and basically I came across some of my friends that were very close. Things were not really too good. So we suggested that, we should find a way to test, to do a test. And when he did test, they were positive. And because of my closeness and all that, I decided that immediately I knew that that was a danger sign. So immediately I invited the Ogun State local chapter of the NCDC, and fortunately, they responded very aptly and responsibly, and also professionally. Within 24 hours, they were in my house, and we had a screen done for my household, myself, my wife, and my children that were living with us. We had some issues with the results because at that time, Ogun State was not. They had a laboratory, functional laboratory, but they didn't have the necessary approval from the government to carry out tests. So we were sending tests to UCH. So, and the UCH was already, jam-packed, because the governor was doing a roadshow and was encouraging people to have, tests. So, that hung up the results for about 3 days. And when we didn't get the result for 3 days, the Honorable Commissioner, Dr. Tomi Koka, decided that, we couldn't wait any longer. So they came again, took another sample, and sent it to Osun State, hoping that would be, they will have less stress. But it turned out to be untrue. So we finally decided, by that time, or in that period, Ogun State got their validation, and we decided to use the Ogun State facility. But before we got that underway, the results from UCH came and reported that my wife and I were positive. So that was the beginning of the journey. That same day, we were admitted into the isolation center.
When you say you just spoke to your friends, let's just try and have a test, and they had a test, you saw the danger signal. Now, time, of course, clearly is of essence in this. So one wonders, there are those who are taking it for granted, just thinking, well, maybe not. Why did you even decide in the first place to say, look, let's just have a test? Was there any symptom? Did anybody exhibit anything?
Yes, I'm a doctor, basically, and not only just being a doctor, I have been interested in COVID-19, ever since December last year, sub-January. In fact, I am the lawgiver in this area, and even among my children and families all over the place. I tell them what to do, I tell them what not to do. I scream, because I have children, virtually almost, in Europe, in America, in Asia, but then, when I saw one of our aides, behaving I saw signs of fever, cough, and discomfort. To me, it looked as if there was a problem. So I then insisted that, we should find a way to get them tested. And, luckily, everybody agreed to subject himself to test. And when the results came with positive. Because of my association, I knew that I must immediately, check out myself and my immediate family.
I think this just goes to show that COVID-19 is not exactly a respecter of person. You're a doctor, and you'll expect that COVID-19 will say, well, this person knows better, so let me look for another person. Or will deal with me, apparently. But there's something I've noticed, a trend, which is the fact that a lot of people cannot say, this is how I got it. This is where I got it from. I shook hands with this person, or this person sneezed in front of me. But maybe for you, it might be different. Have you been able to pinpoint and say, this is how I got it?
No, it was from association and exposure to, to people close to me that, we see regularly. I also believe, and I'm glad that yesterday when I was reading some updates on COVID-19, WHO is also talking the same thing now. I said it before when I came out, that I believe that majority of the manner in which this virus spreads is largely by droplet infection, more than touching and all these physical things. It's not that touching and physical are not real, but I think the emphasis must be, we must begin to recognize that this thing is airborne. It has been proven that the virus can be in the air for 5 to 6 hours without dying. And therefore, even if you enter a car that somebody who was infected had been 20 minutes ago and had been coughing and sneezing in the car, and you enter and you lock the door and put on the AC and you drive off, you are in the paradise of COVID-19, period.
But, that controversy had raged.
Go
ahead.
Why I'm saying this is that, number one, people must realize that this thing is for real. Even people close to me and my family were previously saying that, these people that are saying they have COVID-19, government has given them money, to come and advertise it and all that. I mean, my case is past that. I'm an elderly person. I'm a statesman. I'm not a member of this administration. I don't belong to their party. Why should I connive, or conspire and say that I have COVID-19, my wife has COVID-19, when we don't have? Nigerians must begin to look at this as a serious thing. It is a serious thing. That is why people like us are talking about it. We have gone through it. It is real. But it is not a death sentence. It is not a death sentence because in the first instance, even the figures that you guys rolled out this morning, you find that consistently, don't let me use the word fatality because I'm not talking to just Chamberlain, I'm talking to Nigerians. Consistently, the death rate is 3% and below or slightly above, depending, and it is global. So, 97% of people who have COVID-19 will get out of it, and majority of them may not even require hospitalization. And I want to tell you something also. There are other much more dangerous diseases that we cope with. Like in 2019, 100 million Nigerians were affected by malaria, 100 million. And close to 300 million people died in 2019 from malaria. And globally, sub-Saharan Africa, over 228 million, this is World Health Report I'm talking about, over 228 million people suffered from malaria, and much higher than 400,000 died. So, but this, up to today, we don't have 200 deaths from COVID-19 in Nigeria. So, it is, we've got to balance it. The only difference between malaria and some of these other diseases, is that this virus is extremely contagious. If you have malaria, you can sleep on the same bed, with somebody, somebody else, and you will not catch malaria. But if you have COVID-19 and you get locked down in the same room with somebody, who is infected, you will most certainly get it. The other good news is that if you are 40 years and below, the chances of getting it is a bit lower than those of us who are much, much older and had other diseases that are troubling us. And, 99% of young people, even if they get infected, will walk away free. So, we've got to balance it. We've got to balance it. I am an advocate. I'm an advocate for people to keep safe. Even my friends who are lamenting because of business, I tell them, only a man in the grave cannot prosper. So let us agree that this year, we are not doing any business. I have personally spent one particular year, I spent 5 million prospecting for business for 12 months, and I didn't get anything. And there was no lockdown. And I didn't kill anybody. So, let us, people who are elites, and other people who are also traders and all that, must really recognize it's not that government is punishing people with a lockdown. That is the concept Nigerians have. They think that, lockdown is a punishment from government. And once you say you relax it, they come out like bees and forget everything else. That's dangerous. It's not that COVID-19 is going to kill you, no. But it's going to make you uncomfortable. You are going to be extremely fearful. And, why do you want to leave your house for 20, 30 days, in isolation? That itself is a severe psychological trauma, which I and my wife went through.
Well, I think for the malaria figures, I think you meant to say 300,000, but I heard you say million. But about the controversy...
No, I said 300,000.
Okay.
300,000, that's what I said.
Okay, yes, about the controversy, whether or not this is airborne. I mean, they say, well, it could be in the air for a while, and then if you keep that distance, depending on how thick it is, so it won't get to a certain limit. So does that make it airborne? Because I thought they're two different things.
Now, this is it. When I say airborne, this is what I mean. When a man sneezes, in the air, all right, or coughs into the air, if it is an open space, the wind blows it away and there may not be enough concentration, for it to be effective. But if you sneeze in a room, especially a closed room with the air conditioner, and you all stay there, then the concentration is enough. The longevity, the lifespan of the virus is good enough to stay there for 5 hours. And those of you who are in that room or in a car, for instance, if an Uber car carries somebody who is infected and he sneezes in the car, he coughs in the car, but the car is air conditioned, he drops off at the next junction or at the next spot, and you call the Uber and you now enter into it, you're in trouble. And that is why I want to suggest that any car that is carrying more than 2 people must have its windows down. You must insist, the windows must be down. That is how you can be safe. The airborne route is becoming more of the likelihood way that the virus is using to infect us.
I guess it's better to be safe than sorry. But this thing about malaria and COVID, because we consistently hear people say, well, look, I've just had symptoms of malaria, it's not COVID, so they take it for granted. How do you suggest people handle this? Because a lot of people always tell you, this is malaria that I've had for a while, and it's still malaria, I'll treat it as malaria, so I shouldn't freak out because people are talking about COVID. What do you say to those people?
Chamberlain, this is a serious dilemma. And I'm speaking the truth. 2 days ago, I was on the phone at about 4 a.m. with Raymond Duposi. We spoke for about 1.5 hours, and he poured out his mind to me. He's not a foolish man. The truth of the matter is that in some cases, we doctors know for a fact, and the only problem is that we are not communicating enough. We are not saying what we should be saying. We're talking over and above the heads of people. We need to come down to people's levels and explain. In medicine, we know that 10 diseases can present in the same way. A heart attack can just present with a chest pain or, a pain around your stomach or something. And ulcer can also present the same way. I have gone to hospital in the midnight, 1 a.m., believing that I was having a heart attack. And when I got there, the young man said, Uncle, we have tested everything, we have done the antigens and all that. He said, there's no heart attack here. I think you have a gastric ulcer. He gave me liquid drugs for ulcer, so asked me to sit down for 30 minutes. And in 30 minutes, I was on my phone, on the WhatsApp and all that. He came and said, you want to go home? And I said, thank you very much. And I left. I never had that. So, basically, many diseases, COVID-19 specifically, presents also like malaria. True. It also presents like common flu. True. It also presents like other illnesses that are common. But it does not mean that every feverish symptom or every coughing or every sneezing is COVID. But, when you have cough, sneezing, low grade fever, there's also a likelihood This is medicine. There's also a likelihood, especially in a prevalent condition which we are in now, where there's a lot of virus infection spreading. If a person comes to me in a clinic as a doctor and presents like that, my first instinct is to eliminate COVID. What I think we're not doing enough is that even when you have, when you have tested positive, for instance, we also do not know, that when you have very high fevers, how sensitive are these tests? People with very high fevers, which may be typically malaria, may also test positive, and that could be false positive. So, but then, government must not take chances, and that's why they're doing what they're doing. They will first of all take everybody in, and then start to treat. But then I think we should go a little bit further. When you have already put somebody in isolation, now continue to now do, to do medical practice. Now do or take blood tests and check for malaria parasites and other, possible illnesses. And, let us clinically evaluate. When I was in, I didn't have so much symptoms at all. My wife only had cough and fever and all that. But during my isolation, I actually developed malaria, for which I was vigorously treated. And after 6 days, it went. Do you understand? I didn't have malaria. I didn't have fever before I got to the place. But the isolation, the mood, the emotional perspective, maybe temporarily lowered my defenses. Mind you, malaria, you don't need to be bitten by a mosquito for you to get malaria. When you get, when mosquitoes bite you and you treat malaria, malaria parasites are stored in your liver. And when you are down, immune-wise, the liver pulls it back into your system and you are down. So, when we have taken people into isolation, all right, we should then continue clinical medicine, do further investigation. It is true, and I can say that, it is true that some of the cases that are in isolation units have malaria, not COVID. But it's better to be safe than to be sorry. If you leave 10 malaria patients outside and you don't want to take them in because you think it's malaria, and then, you mistakenly allow three people who need to be treated and you assume it is malaria, and it actually turned out to be COVID, then you have made a very significant error. So there's nothing wrong in government or NCDC taking in people, who have high temperatures and who are proving positive. That is why when you're under isolation, you are tested, almost every 48 hours, so as to continue to see the consistency of the pattern of your reaction and behavior. But basically also, I want to talk about the issue of drugs. I wrote something on my Facebook. I went to the extent, people were asking me, what drug did you take? What drug? They were asking me in private, they were asking me publicly, and people were very, very scared. So, I only just responded to the questions by saying, oh, these are the drugs I took, these were the dosages I was given. All right, there's a danger in that, I agree. That, people may just rush, because my cousins called me and said, somebody said you should thank you for giving that information, that he has run to buy chloroquine. That was not the intention. And that is why when government said, we shouldn't do it, I've taken it out of my wall. And, I also wrote a rejoinder. But then, there's no place for secrecy anymore in management of people and illnesses. There's no place for secrecy. Government must be transparent. Different isolation centers in this country use and employ different treatments. What they do in Ogun is what is different from what they are doing in Lagos. It's also different from what they're doing in Oyo or Kano.
Before we go to that part, Doc, just before we go to that part, because I'd like us to take you up on, the responses of at the national and subnational levels. But before we go there was a figure of the WHO that you raised the other time, that people who are 40 years old and above are a lot more endangered in the world. And of course, you mentioned your own age and all.
No. No. I didn't say so. I said people who are 40 and below have more tendency not to catch the virus. And if they do, they have greater tendency
it comes to the question. It comes back to the question that I wanted to ask you. NCDC figures says 25% of the people who have COVID-19 in Nigeria are between ages 31 and 40, and that is the age most affected in Nigeria, contrary to what exists in the world. How does that, hit you? Are you concerned?
No. If they say 25% of people who are hit by COVID are in that age bracket, now what happens to the remaining 75? Which age bracket do they belong to?
No, what they said with that figure is that is the most affected age group in Nigeria.
Okay, that is people who are 40 and below. Well, that is understandable. Okay. Because when you check the demography of our situation, we have, it's not just in Nigeria, generally in Africa, we are a very young population. Majority of our people are, very young. And I think the elderly people, 68, 70 and above, are probably about 15, 20. I do not know for the fact. But the youths and the younger people are by far more. So definitely, if there are more, the frequency of or the incidence of disease amongst them, especially diseases that are contagious, will be more in that age group. And that is possibly why we are having less devastating results compared to places like Italy, Spain, and America, where the population, the older population, approaches 40 to 50%. So, this may be the reason why our own situation is much, much milder.
Just back to the issue you wanted to raise the other time about the response from the various states. Some have argued that shouldn't we have a national strategy that all the states will buy into, as opposed to each of the different states, different subnationals, coming up with their own strategies and running with it as they feel it needs to be run with. How do you react to that? Do you think it's a good strategy that the states are going about it as they want, and as opposed to having a national strategy that every state will buy into?
Now, Chamberlain, we have to sympathize with the NCDC. This disease hit us hard in February, and this is just May. Any national strategy must be based on scientific study and the environment. It takes time for such a thing to evolve. And that is why, they still, but in the meantime, you can't wait for a national strategy. Otherwise, people will just be dropping off, in your states. So presently, everybody is doing what they can, and following the rule of thumb to treat patients. But I think I also heard that the NCDC, presently is doing a lot of tests and a lot of investigations. It will take time. Maybe in another 2 months, they can come out and say, this is the national strategy, and it's going to be based on facts, it's going to be based on science, and that is when we can actually have a universal way of approaching this illness. But for now, it has to be like this. And I think the NCDC, they're doing their best, they're working hard, and they're being professional. Because if you just come with the hammer and say, this is the way, and you don't base it on knowledge or science, you will be doing a lot of harm to the country. So let us be patient. This thing is new, and it's not just here. Everywhere in the world, nobody knows which direction to go. That's the truth. That is why I went to the direction of God, and He saved me.
Let me just squeeze this in. We have about a minute to wrap up the conversation. I was looking through your tweets, and I realized that recently, after you were discharged, you put out a tweet asking for forgiveness and saying you have forgiven people. And a lot of people were wondering, what happened during that, the isolation period, the treatment? What did COVID-19 do to you?
Thank you very much. I'm a doctor, and when I was going to the isolation center, I knew what I was going into. Even that I didn't reveal to my wife, but my wife also knew. Number one, I had virtually all the risk factors that is against survival. I had with me. I'm 68 years old, which is not the correct bracket for COVID-19. I am hypertensive, which hypertension reduces or increases your fatality tendency of fatality by about 5 to 6%. I was recently diagnosed diabetes, which also increases by about another 6 or 7%. I had issues with me that naturally will complicate my situation. So as far as I am concerned, the Doyin Okupe before April 23rd, that everybody knows, has died. God has just given me a new lease of life. I'm a brand new person. And therefore, I want to take a new leaf or a new breath of life. And that's why I said, look, in order to show gratitude to God for sparing my life, I want to forgive anybody who has offended me. And I want everybody else who have offended or wrong in any way whatsoever to please forgive me. For me now, it is only service to God and to the nation. I have no personal ambition to pursue, because if I had died, that is the end of it, period. My family itself will not even see the dead body. So for me, it's a new lease of life. It's a completely different ballgame entirely.
Yeah, I know. What does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his own soul? But let's wind down with this one. At the end of the day, looking at the way all of this is turning out, and how government, the states, everyone, responding to it, do you think that there will be any reason for us as a country, at the end of the day, not to have world-class facilities in this country to treat all of this?
Excuse me. For me, and I wrote this on my Facebook wall, the mistakes of the past are daunting. They are perplexing. They are embarrassing. That since 1960 to date, we cannot boast of one major center in the whole country that makes it irrelevant for you to go abroad. As a doctor, I can tell you for free, we have the expertise, both home and away. We have a Nigerian has just been appointed as the head of COVID-19 in Sierra Leone. There are thousands and thousands of very, very highly qualified, competent professionals who are abroad in US and everywhere, including in Nigeria itself here. I don't want to start to mention them. It will look as if I'm advertising for them. Therefore, the problem we will run into, the shame that will overcome this country, is if we do not learn a great lesson from this and immediately embark on at least, look, I have a quote in my, I've had it for 1 year, working with experts, abroad and everything, to do a standard hospital that will not require any Nigerian to fly anywhere is a cost of less than $150 million US. That's just it, $150 million US. If you multiply that by 6, you are not even talking about, $1 billion. Okay. And, we are just been given, we are given $3.5 billion, as facilities and all that. If we just take one out of that and spend it to establish these things, then we will have learned a great lesson. And I believe that this government will do so.
All right. We do thank you very much indeed for talking to us. We wish you and your family all the best.
Thank you very much.